Hello and welcome to today's session. So we continue to discuss this play by Lorraine Hansberry, A Raisin in the Sun, and we are trying to look at some of the significant instances which will also help us to have a better understanding of the characters as well as the themes which are enunciated in this play. So if one takes a look at the characters and begin to wonder who is the protagonist over here, maybe one of the easiest characters whom we could foreground over here is Walter. And if we look at the kind of dilemmas and the difficulties that Walter goes through as an individual, we find that he is perhaps the one character in this who's trying to assimilate the best, who is trying to make the most of the American context and the American dream in the 1950s. And he's also the one who is perhaps, trying to live in denial of his identity, to the point of denial in a good way, as to the point of him even assuming that these things will not make a difference at all. So we find that if we situate Walter as a protagonist, and if there is a need for us to point out an antagonist over here, it sometimes in a very superficial level we might think that it is the white community, it is the Linda who's trying to convince him not to go ahead with the property purchase, not to live in that white neighborhood. But if we think about it in a very deep philosophical sense, we find that the antagonist over here is racism. Walter's fight is against racism, not in a very plain sense by defending the ethnic purity, whichever way you choose to say it, not just in that sense, but his fight is against racism in terms of trying to appropriate, trying to claim what is available for the other citizens too. So of course, there are these identity markers that he cannot completely do away with, but he is trying his best not to become those deterrent. His African American identity, the way that how his skin tone is different from the others, how his he's being perceived not as an individual but as part of a community which could be potentially dangerous. So these are the things. And also halfway through the play we also get to know that it's also a community who is also subject to a lot of attacks, legal attacks, physical attacks. So we find him trying to rise above all these differences and to claim what is out there for all American citizens. So here his fight in that sense, it's a fight against racism, and the politics over here is very subdued but strong. It's a very subtle protest against racism, not in an intellectual sense, not in an emotional sense, but in a very practical way, which is also, one of the beauties of a place like this. In fact, most of these plays that we have looked at so far, they have these characters who are heavily invested in the American dream, but they are also, the characters who are trying to be practical to the core, who are trying to make, carve for themselves an alternate path, a less trodden path, in order to find their way towards the American dream. So in almost complete contrast to this, we find the character of Joseph Assagai. We find that the contrast here is, it does lead to a lot of emotional conflict. But we find that though they belong to the same race in a very technical sense, there's a different way in which they are looking at their own identity. So there is something very non-American about the way in which Assagai is responding to reacting to certain things that Benita does. For instance, if we could take a look at this instance where Assagai is back from Canada and Benita is happy to have him back. So they are having this conversation, and so Assagai is gifting her a package. So this is a telling instance of how Assagai chooses to look at his own identity, and how that identity which he wants to imbibe, the identity which he wants to display, and the identity which he wants to also sell in some sense, is seen as very exotic by Benita. So here he brings this package which has some records and the colorful robes of a Nigerian woman. And Benita is mightily impressed over here. It's also something very exotic for her. Her response is quite similar to that of perhaps, any other American, any other white American. "Oh, as a guy, you got them for me. How beautiful," and the records too. She lifts out the ropes and runs to the mirror with them and holds the drapery up in front of herself. Yeah. And as the guy is also, saying, "I shall have to teach you how to drape it properly." So there are certain, proper ways in which things are done within particular ethnic groups. And here we find the cosmopolitanism that, a character like Benita is trying to embrace. Yeah, that's seen as assimilation and even mutilation very soon by Assegai. So he flings the material about her for the moment and stands back to look at her, and "You wear it well, very well, mutilated hair and all." Yeah. So Benita is certainly asking, "My hair, what's wrong with my hair? Were you born with it like that?" "Of course not." She looks back to the mirror, disturbed. "How then?" "You know perfectly well how, as crinkly as yours, that's how." "And it is ugly to you that way?" "No, no, not ugly." Apologetically, it's a very important word over here. This is what she feels. Yeah. Now one begins to wonder, whether she's apologetic for, making her hair look different and more beautiful in her own way, perhaps, or is she apologetic for not perhaps, adhering to the standards that Assegai is now setting up before her. It's so hard to manage when it's raw, Assegai. And so to accommodate that, you mutilate it every week. Yeah. So look at the term that he is using over here. The assimilation or this embracing of this cosmopolitan culture, as perhaps Benita would want to see it, it is seen as mutilation over here. Mutilation of an identity, mutilation and almost an annihilation of an ethnic community, from which, of course, the African American community also draws much. Yeah. So here, philosophically, they are in. They belong to two different worlds altogether. Of course, towards the end, Benita accepts his invitation, accepts his proposal and decides to leave for Nigeria to become a doctor. Yeah, so we do find that, there's a chord that they are striking with each other, but philosophically, intellectually, politically, they seem to be inhabiting two different worlds over here. It is not mutilation, and this is, she's certainly very disturbed. She's apologetic, and this is no longer the confident, arrogant self that she displays in front of her family. Not with Walter, with her mother. Yeah. Assegai, "Oh please, I'm only teasing you because you're so very serious about these things." He stands back from her and folds his arms across his chest as he watches her pulling at her hair and frowning in the mirror. "Do you remember the first time you met me in school? You came up to me and you said, I thought you were the most serious little thing I had ever seen. You said, 'Mr. Assegai, I want very much to talk with you about Africa. You see, Mr. Assegai, I am looking for my identity.'" Yeah. So her face is quizzical and she's profoundly disturbed. And Assegai is still continuing in that same strain. "Well, it's true that this is not so much of a profile of a Hollywood queen as perhaps of a queen of Nile, a mock dismissal of the importance of the question. But what does it matter? Assimilationism is so popular in your country." So here one wouldn't know how one would begin to look at the word assimilation over here. And we also need to keep this in mind that this is a 1950s play where a lot of critical discussion, a lot of intellectual energy had not yet begun to be invested on to these questions, the questions of race, the questions of identity, to assimilation, which is really a big deal today when one is talking about critical race studies. So she's also getting very defensive over here. So look at these series of emotions that she undergoes over here. She's apologetic, she is disturbed, and she's also very passionately defensive over here. "I'm not an assimilationist." Yeah. The protest hangs in the room for a moment, and Assegai studies her, his laughter fading. "Such a serious one. So you like the ropes? You must take excellent care of them. They are from they're from my sister's personal wardrobe. You sent all the way home for me? For you. I would do much more. Well, that's what I came for. I must go." Yeah. So we have a great deal to talk about, about identity and time and all that time. About how much time one needs to know what one feels. Yeah. So here, identity is a question about how one feels as well. Here we find that, within the same family, Walter and Benita, they grew up under similar circumstances. Yeah, same kind of political climate and socio-cultural climate that they were acclimatized to, but they're very different in terms of how they feel about their identity. So identity, in some sense, in this play, it becomes something which is very experiential. One can choose to experience in many different ways, irrespective of being put in the same similar circumstance. Yeah? So the experientiality of identity is something which gets foregrounded in the discussion over here. We never understood that there is more than one kind of feeling which can exist between a man and a woman, or at least there should be. So here, this experientiality, which with respect to the identity, is also, about making a decision. If you think about, the decision that she makes at the end, it's not purely a decision made out of love. It is, much more than that. It is about how she feels about Assegai, and also about how she feels about Assegai as an African, and how she feels about her own identity as an African. Because choosing to leave for Nigeria is also, in some sense, it means that she is willing to embrace the Africanness in her more than the African Americanness in her. Yeah. So we don't know, the play does not give us a chance to figure out how this will eventually pan out, neither for Walter or Assegai or for Benita. But, this is a chance. This is like a plunge that she takes. So here, we also see, this Assegai has a very amused kind of response to the feminist articulations of Benita. It's how you can be sure that the world's most liberated women are not liberated at all. You all talk about it too much. Yeah. So at this point, we can choose to agree or not agree with Assegai over here, because the kind of liberation that he's witnessing is not something that he is used to, given his the native traditions and the culture that he is used to. But what Benita is also, what she wants is perhaps, in some sense, the best of both worlds. She wants to be able to embrace her identity, but at the same time claim the progressive ideas that the country of America is putting forward. Yeah. So here, she's also introducing Assegai to her mother, and we find that even before Assegai had arrived, the entire family was schooled into how this guest from Africa would be treated, because they have a very different way in which here we find the mother being this a perfect figure through which we can analyze the complexities of race over here. Yeah, and the way her the identity of her race, yeah, is in some sense heavily influenced by her Americanness as well. Yeah, so there is no pure Africanness. There is no pure native tradition that any one of these characters can claim to. Yeah. So if we take a quick look at this instance just before this episode, where Benita is first introducing her mother, talking about Assegai to her mother. Yeah. So, Assegai, you're inviting over here with this house looking like this. You ain't got the pride you was born with. Assegai doesn't care how houses look. He's an intellectual. Who? Assegai, Joseph Assegai. He's an African boy I met on campus. He's been studying in Canada all summer. What's his name? Assegai. He's from Nigeria. Oh, that's a little country that was founded by slaves way back. No, mama, that's Liberia. Yeah. So we find that, it's not as if the African Americans, they have it all sorted in their head about where their fellow Africans come from. It's a different country for them, it's a different culture for them, and politically also they don't relate with them at all. So here we find that Benita's mother is talking just like any other white woman over here. No, mama, that's Liberia. I don't think I never met no African before. Well, do me a favor and don't ask him a whole lot of ignorant questions about Africans. I mean, do they wear clothes and all that? Well, now I guess if you think we are so ignorant around here, maybe you shouldn't bring your friends here. It's just that people ask such crazy things. All anyone seems to know about when it comes to Africa is Tarzan. Yeah. So this here, we find that Benita's family is no different from any other American family here, where they exoticize the African culture, whether they it's very alien to them. It's so very non-American, irrespective of how similar they are in terms of the ethnicity that they share. Why should I know anything about Africa? Why do you give money at church for the missionary work? Well, that's to help save people. You mean to save them from heathenism? Yes. I'm afraid they need more salvation from the British and the French. So here, Lorraine Hansberry is taking this opportunity to critique colonialism as well. How the empire, eventually became something from which these natives had to be saved from. So, on the one hand, people like Vinita's mother, they think that the Africans should be saved, saved from their pagan practices. Christianity, here becomes a tool through which they could save the Africans. But Vinita is getting very political over here. She's cutting into this religious discourse, the subtlety of this religious discourse, and says they need more salvation from the British and the French, because most of the African countries were French and British colonies, and they were left in a very sad state. And we won't get into the details of it, but here we find a very subtle critique operating, a critique of colonialism operating over here. So in the middle of all this, there's also certain political realities, certain social realities which they cannot entirely ignore. For instance, when this character Johnson makes an appearance, drawing attention to this news headline, Negroes invade Cliburn Park bombed. So this creates an equal sense of panic. This is something which would create panic not just for the whites but for families such as Walter's family as well. So a mother is saying, we ain't exactly moving out there to get bombed. Oh honey, I'm praying to God every day that nothing like that happened, but you have to think of life like it is. And these here, Chicago Peckerwoods, it's some bad Peckerwoods. So we done thought about all that, Ms. Johnson. So we do find that, here there is some discomfort while they are talking about this, because the implication is also that, one community is more dangerous than the other. And when they come across, this news where another bomb was set off yesterday, did they? What's the matter with you? Ain't nothing the matter with me, and don't keep asking me that this morning. So there is this social reality which is out there, and this reference to this bombing of certain neighborhoods, it does create a lot of discomfort. But there is no attempt in the play to make these characters defensive about it, because this is seen a social problem, just the way another American family would, another white American family would see it. So there's no need, there is no way in which they get into a defensive mode about the community, because as mentioned earlier, Walter is he as well as his mother, they've imbibed the American spirit in so many ways. They do talk about the pride of the family, they talk about the pride of the individual, and that's also something why they operate very differently for them as individuals, as families. But we do find that it's also it has got to do largely about the way they have imbibed the spirit of individualism from the country that they have chosen to live in. So we'll just take a look at how Johnson responds to this incident. You mean you ain't read about them colored people that was bombed out of their place out there? Ain't it something how bad these here white folks is getting here in Chicago? Lord Ketting. So you think you ride down in Mississippi with a tremendous and rather insincere sense of melodrama. Of course, I think it's wonderful how folks keeps on pushing out. You hear some of these Negroes around here talking about how they don't go where they ain't wanted and all that, but not me, honey. Wilhelmina Otella Johnson goes anywhere, anytime she feels like it. Yes, I do. Why, if we left it up to these here crackers, the poor niggers would have nothing. Oh, I always forget you don't love that word in your house. I don't love it. Me neither. I was just telling Isaiah yesterday when he came in front of me, when he come using it in front of me, I said, Isaiah, just like Miss Younger says all the time. So here, we also find a lot of differences between these different communities, these different families who all, share their, racial identity. So nigger is not a word that the younger family finds acceptable. And we find that, for them, even as a guy is an outsider. He is not seen as someone, who shares their culture, who shares their philosophy, who shares their view of life. Yeah. So this is perhaps, the most challenging as well as most complex thing about this play, where it becomes difficult to slot the characters. Yeah. So race here becomes the discriminatory practice of race here becomes an enemy for both the white as well as the black characters, for the African Americans as well as, characterized as a guy who is an African from Nigeria. But that set put aside, we find that race does not become something which is acceptable to any of these characters. Yeah, race is something. Racism, the discriminatory practices that come out of racism is something that all the characters equally try to stay away from. But there is of course a difference in the way they respond to it based on their gender locations, based on their class locations, or even based on the kind of intellectual engagement that they have with these sort of discourses. Because in the characters of Vinita and Asagai, that's what we see. It's also about how they process it. Yeah, it's also about how they try to engage with the discourse in an intellectual sense. So now we'll come to the almost the final segment of this play, where Linda comes and meets up with Walter, hoping to convince him. So my name is Carl Linda, Walter Younger. This is my wife, Ruth, my sister. So Linda says, I'm a representative of the Cliburn Park Improvement Association. So that's a neighborhood, where they have this property and they're thinking of moving in over there. And as I was saying, I'm from the Cliburn Park Improvement Association, and we have had it brought to our attention at the last meeting that you people, or at least your mother, has bought a piece of residential property at 406 Cliburn Street. That's right. Care for something to drink? Ruth, get Mr. Linda a beer. So Linda, oh no, really, I mean, thank you very much, but no thank you. Some coffee, nothing at all, because, he is not going to talk to them about something which would actually, help him to receive any hospitality. Well, I don't know how much you folks know about our organization. He's a gentleman, thoughtful and somewhat labored in his manner. It is one of these community organizations set up to look after, things like block upkeep and special projects. And also we have what we call our New Neighbors Orientation Committee. Yeah, so they're continuing to listen. Well, it's what you might call a sort of welcoming committee. I mean, they are. I'm the chairman of the committee, go around and see the new people who move into the neighborhood and sort of give them the lowdown of the way we do things out in Cliburn Park. Yeah? So there is clearly, there's a sense of community feeling over here, not just in terms of the Cliburn Park. It's also, we find that it's a white man who is talking, and we know who's we and who's us over here, who's them over here. We also have the category of what the association calls a special community problems. Yeah. So now Benita is getting very impatient and trying to interfere, and Walter is allowing him to talk. Walter certainly, despite the flaws that he has, he comes across as more accommodating in some sense. Yeah, he comes across as very practical, very down to earth, irrespective of the ideas that he has and how he loses his money, all of that. Yeah. So thank you. I would sort of like to explain things in my own way. I mean, I want to explain to you in a certain way. I am going to try to get right to the point. I'm sure we all appreciate that in the long run. So you look at this, it's a very long prefatory discussion over here. So Linda also finds it very uncomfortable to come straight to the point. And this discomfort shows that race over here, racial discrimination of any kind, is a common enemy of all characters over here. And again, I reiterate this over here, Lorraine Hansberry's play, maybe one of the most successful elements of this play is this aspect where all characters are equally uncomfortable when it comes to addressing race. The reason for the discomfort could be many, it could be because, the ancestors were perpetrators, could be because the ancestors were victims, yeah. But regardless of that, we find that the discomfort is there, making race the common enemy, racism the common enemy over here. And he continues, to get straight to the point, yeah. I'm sure you people must be aware of some of the incidents which have happened in various parts of the city when colored people have moved into certain areas. Well, because we have what I think is going to be a unique type of organization in American community life. Not only we do deplore that kind of thing, but we are trying to do something about it. We feel that most of the trouble in this world, when you come right down to it, most of the trouble exists because people just don't talk, just don't sit down and talk to each other. Yeah. So they are continuing that we don't try hard enough to understand the other fellow's problem, the other guy's point of view. He says he's coming straight to the point, but he still hasn't. That's a way we feel out in Cliburn Park. That's why I was elected to come here this afternoon to talk to you people friendly, like, the way people should talk to each other, and see if we couldn't find some way to work this thing out. As I say, the whole business is a matter of caring about the other fellow. Anybody can see that you're a nice family of folks, hardworking and honest, I'm sure. Today, everybody knows what it means to be on the outside of something. And of course, there's always somebody who's out to take advantage of people who don't always understand. So we find that he's forced to go about in this very long and winding way, because this is a very uncomfortable situation. He really cannot come straight to the point. Here, language comes very handy to in some sense, capture the discomfort over here. So there's no right vocabulary to talk about the practice of racism. And that's also something that this play, it's beginning to foreground over here. It's about 3 pages of this continuous rambling about Linda setting the stage to just begin a conversation, an ordinary conversation with another ordinary set of people, where, he's struggling to get the right kind of vocabulary. So here is where, we begin to wonder whether it's mutilation or assimilation. We begin to wonder, the kind of whether it's an equal race towards this American dream as Walter wants it to be. Well, you see, our community is made up of people who worked hard as the Dickens for years to build up that little community. They're not rich and fancy people, just hardworking, honest people who don't really have much but those little homes and dream of the kind of community they want to raise their children in. So it is, we find a very complex mix of race and class operating over here. Yeah? And there is an anxiety which is not based entirely on how individuals think about things. It's an anxiety of a community. It's an anxiety of a society. It's a historical anxiety which has been passed down, and which is why, this intense struggle to find the right kind of vocabulary in a politically correct way to talk about this. Now, I don't say we are perfect, and there's a lot wrong in some of the things they want, but you've got to admit that a man, right or wrong, has a right to want to have the neighborhood he lives in a certain kind of way. And it just continues with this rambling. At the moment, the overwhelming majority of our people out there feel that people get along better, take more of a common interest in the life of the community when they share a common background. Yeah. So this is very significant. Yeah. On the one hand, here, I want you to pause and think about how this play is critiquing American dream over here. It is getting to the heart of the problem, getting the root of the problem by saying that while there is a notion, there's a sense of the American dream out there, which promises all kinds of material success and fame and reputation and fulfillment to anyone who wants to go for it, irrespective of their background. We find that, there is no common background to begin with. Yeah, there is no common background, no palpable, agreeable common background in terms of race or in terms of class. This is a fundamental difference that we note not just in this play, but also, in Zoo's story. Yeah, and in A Death of a Salesman, while certain families, certain individuals are born into some kind of an inheritance, some are expected to work towards it. Yeah? So it is never a common background to begin with. I want you to believe me when I tell you that race prejudice simply doesn't enter into it. It's a matter of the people of Cliburn Park believing, rightly or wrongly, as I say, that for the happiness of all concerned, that our Negro families are happier when they live in their own community. So how would you refute the logic in it? And how would you address the logic in this? Yeah. So is there a is this logical enough, and how does it, if you place this logic in dialogue with the many political reforms and socio-cultural reforms, how would you begin to address this? And he also states it in a very overt sense that it is not race prejudice, but of course we know that, this is one of the most subtle ways in which race prejudice operates too. And this is also being placed as a a gesture which would be acceptable for the Negro families, because they would be also be happier when they live in their own community. So this is clearly a divide over here of us and them. Yeah, irrespective of how the polity is shaping up, the us them divide seems to be creating a huge say difference over here. And of course, this is the welcoming committee. Benita remarks very bitterly over here. So Linda still thinks they're having a fine conversation, yeah, and thinks they are a very generous family, and the association is prepared to continue this discussion and all that, yeah. So, and he also Walter suddenly asking him to get out of the house. And Linda says, I don't understand why you people are reacting in this way. What do you think you're going to gain by moving into a neighborhood where you just aren't wanted, and where some elements, well, people can get awful worked up when they feel that their whole way of life and everything they've worked for is threatened. Yeah? Pay attention to these words over here. First, he talks about protecting the Negro family, keeping them happy by making them live, among their own kinds, and that seems to be the agenda. The overall the community welfare seems to be the agenda. Now, when they're continuing this conversation, we find that one community, the African community, the African American community, the Negroes, as the play continues to refer to it, they are the ones who are seen as threats. So the welfare, the social welfare, the happiness quotient, and everything that he is talking about, the Lindner is talking about, it's only for the white community. So here, while he is trying to talk about, this in very balanced way, we also know that he's come here, he's come to Walter's home, as the younger family's home, as a spokesperson of the white community. Yeah. So this also, incidentally, it suddenly becomes a bonding moment for the family. They share a light moment right after that. Yeah. So Benita, they are imitating, they're mimicking the situation. The welcoming committee. They said they are sure going to be glad to see you when you get there. Yeah, they said they can't hardly wait to see your face. Yeah, so here we find that for the first time perhaps in the play, they're beginning to bond. They're beginning to see that the real enemy is perhaps out there. And of course, they're not blaming Lindner either over here. Yeah, it is about the peculiar way in which the system has fashioned itself into. We're just telling you about the gentleman who came to see you this afternoon from the Clyburn Park Improvement Association, and now they are relaying everything to the mother, and about the money they raised to buy the house from us, all we paid and then some. So this is actually a lot of money over there. What they get as an offer to forgo the property in Clyburn is perhaps more than the money that they got by way of insurance. Yeah, and of course they do not go ahead with it. And as we come to the end of the play, we find that all of them are making a few very quick and crisp decisions. Yeah, the decisions which were the point of conflict all throughout the play, all throughout in some sense, the point of conflict in their family life entirely. So we find mother deciding to give some money to Walter, whatever is remaining, and there is suddenly a trust which is placed on Walter, which makes him happy, and it also makes it possible for them to face the future together. Benita also takes the decision to leave for Nigeria to work there as a doctor, and they all seem to be happy about the choices that they have made. Yeah, it's almost they seem to have developed the enemy out there, and they seem to have more clarity about who they are and how they should be dealing with these different circumstances, and the realization that there's no other way in which they can deal with it unless and until they work together. Yeah, and if you come to the just gradually go through the final bits over here, where Walter comes to know from Bobo that he's lost the money. Gone, what do you mean Willie is gone? Gone where? You mean he went by himself? You mean he went off to Springfield by himself to take care of things, of getting the license? You mean maybe he didn't want too many people in on the business down there? Yeah. So here is, he's getting cheated. Yeah. He's trying to invest in the liquor business and he is being cheated by Willie. And it is again, he's not cheated by a person like Lindner. Yeah. Lindner is someone, if you think about it in very pragmatic terms, if you break down this in a very technical sense, we find that Lindner is someone who's offering him money to just stay out of the white neighborhood. And Willie, in fact, cheats him and runs away with his money. But still we find that, it's a very different kind of politics at work over here. It's difficult to choose a side over here. Difficult to say, what would be the safest bet in terms of, whether to go trust the white community, which is skeptical about you. Yeah, but they're willing to offer money just to keep you away. Or do you continue to trust the likes of Willie, yeah, where, you also can bond in many other ways. Yeah. So my mother is also, obviously heartbroken. Is it gone? I gave you $6,500. Is it all gone? All of it? Benita's money too? I never went to the bank at all. You mean your sister's school money, you used that too? Yes, all of it. So there is this realization at the end of it. Yeah. At the end of the play, it's a mixed kind of an ending. Yeah. We'll read through this description. There's total silence. Ruth stands with her face covered with her hands. Benita leans forlornly against a wall, fingering a piece of red ribbon from the mother's gift. Mama stops and looks at her son without recognition and then, quiet without thinking about it, starts to beat him senselessly in the face. Benita goes to them and stops it. Mama stops and looks at both of her children and rises slowly and wanders vaguely, aimlessly away from them. I seen him night after night come in and look at that rug and then look at me, the red showing in his eyes, the veins moving in his head. I seen him grown thin and old before he was 40, working and working and working like somebody's old horse, killing himself. And you give it all away in a day. Yeah. And this is, it's a hard-earned money which had come to them. And, she holds Walter entirely responsible over here. Oh God, look down here and show me the strength. Mama is, she's praying for strength as the play ends. Yeah. So this is the final act over here. So an hour later, we'll take some time to quickly go through this. And so in this final act, things are beginning to fall into place for Benita and Asagai. So at this point, the family is in the kind of a crisis over here. There are decisions to be made. Money is lost. Yeah. And towards the end of third act, we find that, Walter transforms into a very different individual altogether. Yeah. And this father, who was an invisible character until that point, who was of course seen as a source of that money, but he becomes a larger than life character towards the end, almost, becoming like a savior over here. So Walter, towards the end, when he is meeting Lindner, he comes, he arrives at this decision. We have decided to move into our house because my father, he earned it for us brick by brick. Mama has her eyes closed and is rocking back and forth as though she were in church with her head nodding in the amen. Yes, we don't want to make no trouble for nobody or fight no causes, and we will try to be good neighbors. And that's all we have got to say about that. He looks at the man absolutely in the eyes. We don't want your money. So when this family, when they are taking this decision, together, it's also a statement about the kind of individuals they are, the kind of family they are, and the kind of community that they want to project themselves as. Yeah. So Linda says, I take it then that you have decided to occupy. And they are also together, Benita, Walter, Mama, Ruth, yeah, Asagai. They are a united front at this point, yeah. And Linda says, then I would like to appeal to you, Mrs. Younger. You're older and wiser and understand things better, I'm sure. I'm afraid you don't understand. My son said we was going to move and there ain't nothing left for me to say. You know how these young folks is nowadays. Mister can't do a thing with them. She's also letting Walter take this decision because, she knows it is the right decision. And if you're final about it, there's nothing left for me to say. And he bids goodbye and leaves. So now, there's a lot of energy in the family too. They are getting ready to move out of this home and, occupy that white neighborhood. So Benita also, says, she's getting ready to go to Africa to become a doctor. Yeah, also she also says, as the guy has proposed and she would want to go to Africa to practice there. And the moment, George Murchison is brought up again, Benito also dismisses him as in, I wouldn't marry him if he was Adam and I was Eve. Yeah. So there seems to be a closure in some sense for each one of them. Yeah. And we find that eventually a mother, also seems to approve of what Walter has become, the kind of person that Walter has become through this entire process. He finally come into his manhood today, didn't he? Kind of like a rainbow after the rain. Yeah. So Ruth agrees to it. Yes, Lena, y'all come on. These people charge us by the hour, And then they are getting ready to leave. We'll just read this last bit together. Ruth hesitates, then exits. Mama stands at last alone in the living room, her plant on the table before her as the lights start to come down. She looks around at all the walls and ceilings, and suddenly, despite herself, where the children call below, a great heaving thing rises in her, and she puts her fist to her mouth to stifle it and takes a final desperate look, pulls her coat about her, pats her hat and goes out. The light dims out, the door opens, and she comes back and grabs her plant and goes out for the last time. So this is very symbolic. The way she chooses to leave this house, how the family as a united, they put up a united front and they are choosing to leave this house. It's very symbolic about the next bold step they are taking. So I want you to very briefly think about, what kind of assimilation is this? Yeah, whether this is the boldest step that they're going, or whether they're about to do something very stupid. Yeah, because all this while, the entire family, they thought that they were assimilated. They were very well assimilated. They were embracing the American culture. Walter was moving towards the American dream. A mother couldn't even differentiate between Nigeria and Liberia, and through her intellectual self, Benita thought that she knew what to appropriate from her Americanness and how she would eventually belong to her Africanness. Yeah. So in these negotiations of identity, never for a moment they thought that the divide was always like between us and them. So this instance about them getting a property in Claiborne Park and how they are continue to be seen as them, as the other, as the community who might bring with them some threat, discomfort, and even painful instances such as bombings and massacre. Yeah, so this is how their community is being seen. The moment they begin to realize that, they also take this final step of deciding to move into the white neighborhood, of deciding to claim their share of what the American society offers to them. So on this note, we bring this discussion to an end, and we find that this play also had sparked off a lot of debates and discussions in the context of the 20th century America about how racism needs to be tackled in this, while one is also glorifying the American dream and its multiple possibilities. So thank you for your time, and I look forward to seeing you in the next session.